All right, welcome back to Ozark Garage. Today we're going to work on our Lotus 7 replica again. And it's winter time, as you can see by my hat, so it's cold outside, and it's a perfect time to do a long-awaited project for this car. And that project is fuel injection. So if you've seen this car before on the channel, you probably know that it's powered by a Toyota 20R 22R hybrid, so a 20R head on a 22R block. The current fueling system on it is a Weber DGES, which is a 38 millimeter dual synchronous carburetor, and it's worked great thus far, but I've reached a point in my ability to drive this car that I can now brake and turn hard enough that the carburetor will sputter on an autocross course. Needless to say, that's not great for performance, it's not great for my times, so we're gonna fix it with some fuel injection. All right, so if you're not familiar with how a carburetor works, let me give you a quick rundown of why it's problematic when you're braking and turning really hard on an autocross course. Typical carburetors like the Weber have what's known as a float bowl. And the float bowl is simply a portion of the carburetor that holds gasoline in reserve, if you will. As the engine draws air through the venturi, it pulls a metered amount of fuel in through jets from the float bowl. In a normal running car, let's say this is idling or driving in a constant state, you're going to have a certain amount of fuel in the bowl, which is dictated by the float. So there's literally a float in there, which allows more or less fuel to go into the bowl as needed and maintains theoretically a consistent level of fuel in the bowl. If you have too much fuel in the bowl, you're going to have a rich mixture because the engine can pull more fuel than it needs. If you have too little fuel in the bowl, the engine will run lean because it can't pull as much fuel as it needs for that operating environment. So what keeps fuel in the bowl down here is gravity. And as you drive around, and especially if you're taking hard turns and making hard stopping maneuvers on an autocross course, G-forces come into play, which will move the fuel around in the bowl. So this is theoretically the side of the car, and this would be the front of the car. So if you're braking, all the weight is going to shift to the front. So what's going to happen in your float bowl is all of a sudden, you're not going to have fuel at the back of the float bowl anymore, and instead, it's all going to run up and be up here in the front half of the bowl. Without any fuel at the back half of the bowl here, you can't get any through the jet. If you can't get any through the jet, you can't get any through the venturi, and all of a sudden the carburetor is going to sputter. At the very minimum, it's going to run lean, which is going to harm power and your ability to exit a corner after braking. Same thing happens on the side, right? So if this is a top view, and this is the left side of the car, this is the right side of the car, and the float bowl is in front on the Weber DG series carburetor. So as you turn hard, well, all the fuel is going to leave this side of the carburetor in a left turn. Well, now this side of the carburetor has no fuel. Under hard braking is where I notice it the most. Fuel goes all the way to the front of the carburetor, and the car will sometimes die or almost die, and then trying to exit the corner with some gas, it sputters and takes a little bit, and it just cuts into my times. So electronic fuel injection will solve this issue. Now, a lot of people think electronic fuel injection will solve all their issues. Not necessarily. Fuel injection may or may not make more power. It may or may not be more reliable because you've added more complication, high pressure fuel pump, electronics, all sorts of issues. So it's definitely a double-edged sword, but this is an issue that I really want to solve, and the trade-offs of the electronic fuel injection are worth it to me. What we have here is the 1979 block that came with the original 20R engine that came out of the 79 Toyota pickup. If you haven't seen the video where I built the Lotus 7 replica, you should check that out. I'll put a link in the upper right-hand corner. And then this is the 22R head that came on the 22R block that's in there right now. So in the car right now, there's a 20R head on a 22R block. The stock 20R head flows better than a stock 22R head, supposedly, has hemispherical combustion chambers, but the 22R, the early ones, have a raised dome piston, so it's higher compression, and it's also a larger displacement, 2.4 liters instead of 2.2 liters. So I basically had this sitting over in the corner, and I've dug it out to see if this 22R head is going to help me with my fuel injection conversion. So the 20R never came with fuel injection from the factory, but later 22Rs did. So a 22R EFI manifold, if it doesn't bolt up, you may need to drill and tap a couple holes, which is pretty easy to do. But I want to make sure it's usable. I'm going to go ahead and clean it up, check the valves, inspect it, pull this carbureted manifold off, and go from there. All right, so I got the head off the engine. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through and inspect it a little bit. I don't know if this was a running engine when I got it. I think it was, but I'll be honest, I can't remember. But everything looks all right. Looks like it was a running engine, running in okay shape. It really needs to be cleaned up. I'm going to clean up the surface here, lap the valves, and just generally go through it and make sure that this is something worth the time and effort to put on the engine in the car. And so in terms of whether or not a fuel injection manifold will fit on this, I did a little bit of research, and what most people say you need to do is if you don't have these other holes drilled and tapped, which I do, all of mine are drilled and tapped here, then you need to drill and tap them. So apparently this should be a silica head, you know, an 83, 84 in that ballpark silica head, because they're the only ones that had fuel injection in the early hemispherical combustion chamber blocks, which I do. So that's pretty cool that I've got a silica head here, and the Toyota EFI manifold should bolt up pretty easily, which will save me a bunch of time and effort. All right, so I've given the cylinder head a first pass cleaning, and all I really wanted to do with this is get most of the mud and caked on oil cleaned off the head, just so I knew what I was working with. There's a bunch of it, some naphtha in a tub, did a pretty good job. And then I went ahead and pulled the valves out of it. Overall, everything I've seen is good. The valves themselves are in good shape, not too worn. The intake valves actually look great. The sealing surfaces are bright and shiny. There's a little bit of pitting on the exhaust valves and their seats. Nothing that won't come out with some lapping though. But overall, this is in really good shape, and I think it'll work fine for what I need. So I'm just gonna go through and I'm gonna finish bagging and tagging all the parts just so I know where they all go. So after this, I'll go ahead and clean up the valves, get rid of the carbon on them, and then I'll start lapping them and clean up the sealing surface on the head. All right, quick update. My plan to tape some sandpaper to a piece of glass and slide the head across it didn't work out. So once I tried painter's tape and some Gorilla tape. Basically, once the WD-40 gets into the tape, it lets go and then crinkles up and creates issues. So instead, I flip the head over like this, and I actually have a small surface plate, which is a very precision ground piece of granite used for measuring. And I'm using that as a sanding block. It's got enough weight by itself, and it's a pretty decent size. So just working it back and forth around on the head, using its own weight, keeping it flat, keeping it smooth, and just surfacing the head that way. So far it seems to be working. I'll check it for square as I go along, and I'm slowly removing the pits, so it seems to be working. So after getting the sealing surface of the head most of the way cleaned up, I stopped because there's some pitting on here that's pretty deep, and this is pretty common on aluminum heads, especially if they've been sitting around for a while or attached to an engine. And the pitting is deep enough that I'm not going to be able to sand it out. I could have it surface, but if you deck the surface of this block too much, you're going to affect the cam timing because it's an overhead cam engine, and I don't want to do that. And you can only get thicker head gaskets in certain amounts, and you're not going to be able to take out all the pitting that I've got on this engine and have a head gasket that works well. So I'm going to do something that at first seems a little hack, but that is to use some JB Weld to fill in the pits. And before you blow up the comments section, I invite you to go out on the internet and do some research. And this is a very, very common method for fixing the pits in the cylinder head. The pits I'm dealing with here are not in the compression ring area at all. They are at the water jacket. And so what I don't want to have is I don't want to have a passive head gasket water leak either into the cylinder or outside the engine. So I'm just going to fill those pits in very quickly with some JB Weld. It's not going to take much. and then I'm going to continue surfacing the head, clean it up, and it'll be ready to go. All right, so I've got the pitting on the head filled and sealed. So the JB Weld cured for about 48 hours. I first started cleaning up with a file just to get the high spots knocked down, and then I went to 220 on my surface plate and then finished it up with some 320. The pits are still there, they're still visible, but they are filled and they are sealed and they're smooth, so we shouldn't have any oil or coolant leaks. So now this head just needs a thorough cleaning, just a really good degreasing, and then it'll be ready to reassemble with the valves, springs, seals, and put it on the car. All right, so to lap the valves in the head, all I did was connect an electric drill to a drill bit, to a piece of hose, to the valve itself. After applying some valve grinding compound to the valve itself, you can spin it in the seat and grind both the valve and its seat very quickly, getting them lapped together, and got rid of all the pitting and corrosion I had. I've got the silica head here just sitting on this piece of plywood, and I've got the 22RE intake mounted to it. This is the lower intake plenum for a 22RE. So a 22R, that's fuel injected, hence the E, electronic fuel injection. So you may be thinking, well, if this is a fuel injected intake, where's the rest of it? The answer to that is the other half of this fuel injection intake has a bend that comes up and a plenum that sits up here above the fuel rail. It's actually pretty high up here. I don't have clearance for that, so I'm going to end up cutting this and making my own intake plenum with a much lower profile. The factory Toyota fuel rail uses a 14mm banjo fitting for the fuel inlet. So an off-the-shelf adapter adapts that to a -6 AN, so I can use standard AN style fittings and hoses for the high pressure line. I bought a set of upgraded injectors for a 22RTE, so factory turbo engine. These are, call it 330cc injectors. These should be overkill for the naturally aspirated engine I'm going to start with, but if maybe when I turbo this up later on, I should have plenty of injector for that. For a throttle body, I'm going to use a Ford Ranger 3.0. This works really well with the Microsquirt fuel injection because it's got a compatible throttle position sensor and it has a 2-wire or pulse width modulation IAC valve or idle air control valve. If you look at this tape line down here, this tape line represents kind of the extreme edge of how far I can go with the intake and throttle body before it hits the hood. The throttle body, I think I'm going to end up mounting it on its side like this so that the idle air control valve clears here, and then my intake can be a tube that comes off here. It picks up cold air from the side of the car. I 3D printed this flange here just to make sure I had the dimensions correct. I scanned the flange here on a scanner and then traced it in SolidWorks to make this flange, and then I ordered an aluminum one here from Send Cut Send that I can TIG weld to my intake plenum. The 22RE intake manifold had a large boss up here for sensors, and I don't need that many sensors. I just need one up here for the coolant temp sensor. I'll just have this one back here for my coolant temperature gauge on the dash. I'll still have a mechanical gauge. So I went ahead and cut this off, and that gives me more room for the fuel line up here and throttle body and intake tube. I'll just put a plate in here that's drilled and tapped for 3/8 NPT for a sensor. So other than that, I think it's time to start mocking up a sheet metal intake and cut the intake tubes on this and get rolling. All right, so I got the intake manifold all welded up here. Turned out pretty good. The only things that really caused me issues was the factory casting. So this is 40 years old. Got to some spots where it would hiss and pop and you could smell oil burning out of it. I thought I cleaned it, but not well enough, I guess. Probably should have boiled it or figured something out. But I got my boss here welded in for the coolant temperature sensor. I need to chase those threads a little bit deeper. Now that it's welded in, warpage should be down. I need to tap the holes for the throttle body here, and I can mount the throttle body up. I'll need to add a boss with a few vacuum ports on it, so I'll probably just weld a piece of aluminum with 3 1/8-inch NPT tapped holes in it. That will let me attach 3 vacuum lines, so I need one for the fuel pressure regulator here, bypass. I need one for the map sensor for the EFI, and then I need one for my boost gauge. Also, I'm going to need to drill and tap that hole right there from the factory. It's for a cold start injector. I'm not going to use a cold start injector. The Microsquirt has startup functionality already built in, so I'm going to drill and tap that to 1/8-inch NPT also, so I can put a plug in there if nothing else, but I may actually put a fuel pressure gauge, just so I can monitor fuel pressure when tuning. So I got the intake manifold completely built here. Throttle body mounts up, everything seems to fit as it should, and I think that's where I'm going to stop this episode. I'm not quite ready to put this on the car just yet. Still have some more cleanup on the head to do, install some seals, put the valves back in. It's kind of cold outside right now also, so even if I got the car running, I wouldn't really want to drive it around to get it tuned up. And I don't want to have kind of a beached whale, a car I can't move around under its own power if I don't have to. So I'm going to table this for right now, work on some other projects, get some parts on order. So I need a high pressure fuel pump and some other fuel system components for this. And then we'll get back to it here when the weather warms up a little bit. So be sure to hit that subscribe button so you can follow along with part 2 as we install the Microsquirt EFI and get it all installed and tuned up. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.